Welcome, my friends, to a new episode of Framework. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the Test, Teach, Test framework. This is Shadi Abu Yusuf from British E-Training Centre. So, now, let's start with the first stage of the TTT framework. And as you may guess, of course, it's leading. Because as we agreed before in all previous episodes, we always start our frameworks with a leading stage because it's very important to attract students' attention before you start teaching them any topic. So today I've got a lesson from Face to Face, a wonderful course book designed for the intermediate level. So let's have a look at it. And as we see, so we've got vocabulary, likes and dislikes. And then we have a question here, match these phrases, is to A to C, check in, blah, blah, blah. Right, good. So now we understand that the topic is about likes and dislikes. Okay, right. And then we have I really love, I really hate, I don't like. Okay, so now we've got some idea about the topic. Now this idea needs to be confirmed. So let's go a bit further and see the rest of the lesson. So when we look at activity 2, look at this. Think about how you feel about these things. Waiting in queues, doing the washing up, buying new shoes. So now likes and dislike, but it's more about personal opinions regarding different things. Wonderful. So now we can come up with a leading. Now the first thing we need to do is to check the course book first. Does the course book give you a leading? That's a very good question. So let's see. Back again to question number 1. And question number 1, it says, match these phrases to A to C and check in page 114. Now, that's not a leading. That's a direct activity. And we cannot start our class with this. So we need a leading. Now, that is about likes and dislikes in a general sense. Oh, so you might do something. You might say, okay guys, I would like you to tell me about things you like and things you dislike. So just a general question, a general discussion with the students. Then one would say, I like traveling. Don't stop there. When a student says, I like traveling, take it from there and ask a follow-up questions. Oh really? Why? And then the student might say, because I love visiting different places. And then you say, well, have you ever been to a different country? So if your student said no, and then you say, so which country would you like to visit? So again, you need to show interest in your students' answers. And you need to ask follow-up questions to make them feel that you're interested in what they're saying. Okay, lovely then. So that would be your leading in a very easy way. Now, we come to the second stage of the TTT framework. And as it says, test, teach, test. So the second stage is a test. Now, someone might say, Shadi, and it doesn't make sense that we start teaching with a test. And I'd say, no, it makes absolute sense because this test stands as a diagnostic test. You want from this test to know how much your students know about your target language. So finally, you end up teaching only what they need. And instead of teaching them everything, and they don't need everything. And again, let me give you an example here. Look at question number 1. And we have so many expressions related to likes and dislikes. So I've got I really love, I really hate, I don't like at all, I can't stand. And if we're thinking about intermediate students, the question is, do you think that students would need much teaching for I really love? Or no, not at this level. I really hate? I don't think so. But maybe I can't stand. That can be a bit challenging. Maybe some students don't know. Maybe some students might get confused. What do we mean by stand here? Is it actually the action of standing up? So again, that's why we have the first test. So the first test will inform you as a teacher of what the students need. And the test is ready here in the course book. Look at activity one more time. Match these phrases to A to C. Check in page 114. So let's look. I really love, I really hate, I don't like. And then we have three main phrases. Phrases to say you like something. Phrases to say something is okay. And phrases to say you don't like something. Well, that's a good test. That's a good start now. Good. So now we have two stages. Leading, we came up with it ourselves. And then we have the first test, which is short and easy. And remember, when you give that test to your students, you need to say this. Don't worry if you get something wrong, just, do your best. So don't make them feel that it is a real test, because it is not. It's just a way of teaching. Because if you made it feel like a real test, students would be anxious. And, as Krashen puts it, when anxiety goes up, acquisition goes down. And you want them to acquire as much language as possible. So don't make them feel worried. Don't make them feel stressed, my friend. Okay, good, lovely. Now we've got our leading, we've got our first test. Now here is the challenging part in this framework, the teach stage. And the reason why I say it's challenging, because a lot of teachers are confused. What do we teach? What do we leave out? And that's what busies the mind. And it's a fair question, because look at this. If we're going to count the number of expressions we have here, let's count together. Let's go to vocabulary 1 and see how many expressions do we have. I really love, that's 1. I really hate 2, and then we've got I don't like 3. I can't stand 4. I'm really 5, and then we have I think is 6, and then we've got really gets on my nerves 7. Can't bear 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. My goodness. And I believe in a 45-minute lesson, you need to teach maximum 7 items, not more than that. So if we've got 15 items, that's nearly the double. Now what do? Then you need to pick and choose. And someone might say, pick according to what? And I would say, according to your understanding of your learners. Part of designing a TTT framework lesson is to have good assumptions about your learners. And of course, every teacher knows his or her learners better than anyone else. So you need to look now at your target language, and what you need to do, my friend, is to think about what might be problematic for your students in terms of what? In terms of meaning, in terms of form, and in terms of pronunciation. Because one of the mistakes that many teachers make regarding this framework is that all what they think about is meaning. No. Think about also challenges that would face the students regarding pronunciation and form. So let's go through activity 1 and through the selection process and try to nominate the 7 items that we're going to cover. Let's do that. So let's check what we have here, and let's choose what kind of language we're going to focus on. So I've got I can't stand, and I guess that can be challenging for my students. Why? Simply because they might be confused between like stand up and stand here in this expression. Also, the illusion of the t sound. So instead of saying I can't stand, they can say I can't stand. Okay, so that also would be a challenge, something that would be interesting to teach. Right, wonderful. Right, so I've got now I can't stand. So let's put this as number 1 here. And then we have I'm really quite interested in. I don't think that would be very challenging for my intermediate students, but let's have a look at this. Oh, really gets on my nerves. I guess that would be challenging. So many reasons. Number 1, meaning. Okay, they might not know what this expression means. Another thing as well, pronunciation, like they need to learn how to say gets on instead of gets on, catenation. Also, they need to learn how to say on my, not on my, which is assimilation. So that's also another thing. And also, form can be challenging. They need to use the right preposition here, which is on. So they don't need to say by or over or whatever. So I've got here, I can't stand, and I've got here, really, really gets on my nerves. We also have, I'm not very keen on. That's a good one to teach as well. Okay, students might not know the usage of keen here, and it might be challenging in terms of pronunciation. They need to learn how to say keen on, not keen on, catenation again. Also drives me crazy. That's also a good expression they need to learn, because drive here is different from the usual action of driving. That's something different. And I'll also take the last one, brilliant, because I know that wonderful, great, annoying, boring might be well known to my students, but brilliant might be a bit challenging. So I'll take that one. I think it's brilliant, so I'll teach that. So now let's count how many items we have now. We have I can't stand, really gets on my nerves, I'm not very keen on, drives me crazy, and brilliant. So I'll end up teaching 5 out of 15. Now, someone might ask, but Shadi, what if the students, didn't know the meaning of I can't bear? What would you do, for example? And I'd say I'd be ready to teach it if I discover from the first test that this is problematic. No problem. If students ask me, I'm ready. So now you'll prepare 5 main items to teach, but again, you're ready to clarify any other item in case the students have questions or they wanted to ask you about it. And of course, in the teaching stage, we will follow the MPF, meaning, pronunciation, and form. And again, the teaching of meaning includes what we call contextualization. And we follow contextualization by what we call elicitation. And then we follow elicitation by what we call concept checking. Okay, so this is how we do it. Now, let me give you an example. Now, imagine that I want to teach my students really gets on my nerves. So the first thing I need to do is to come up with a situation, which is the context. I need to contextualize really gets on my nerves. So, and in my context, I'm not going to use the expression, I'll try to elicit it. So let's see how I'm going to do this. I'll say something like, yesterday I called my bank, I was really angry because I tried to buy something with my credit card and it didn't work. So I called my bank and they put me on hold for 20 minutes, waiting so long gets on. What do you think? There is an expression for that in English. Waiting for so long really gets on my nerves. So look at this. So I contextualized the expression and then I tried to elicit it. Now, if one student gave me the answer, that doesn't mean that everybody understood. And also, if nobody gave me the answer, I would give the answer myself. And then after that, I will move to my concept checking question and I'll say something like, okay, so when I say waiting for so long gets really on my nerves, is it something I like? No. Is it something I hate? Yes. Is it something good or bad? Well, very bad for me. Now, meaning is, okay, complete now. Now, let's move to pronunciation. And in pronunciation, I'm going to use backward drilling. So I say, on my nerves, gets on my nerves, really gets on my nerves, really gets on my nerves. And then, of course, I'm going to take waiting for so long gets really on my nerves. I'm going to put that on the board, okay? And I'm going to write it for my students on the board so that they can see the form and then they can see the use of the preposition and the use also of the tense and all that. So this is what you would need to do with every item from the 5 items you decided to teach. And again, this is a decision that you need to make when you are planning your lesson. And as I said, what if you discovered that one of your assumptions was not correct as a teacher, and you discovered in the real class that there is another item that is more difficult than one of the items you've chosen, and then you wouldn't need to teach that item, but you would need to pay attention to that item you didn't plan. Again, respond to your students' needs, and of course, teach the other item. And that's why I always say, when you're preparing for the teaching stage in the TTT framework, what you need to do is to be ready to handle everything. Yes, you will focus on some items based on your assumptions and your understanding of your students. However, you're ready for any surprise. Now, after this teaching stage, there is the second test stage. And the second test stage needs to be made of two parts: controlled practice followed by freer practice. So let's go to the course book and see whether we're provided with these activities or not. Now we need to look at activity 2 here. And it says, think about how you feel about these things. Choose a different phrase from one for each thing. And then work in pairs, compare ideas, explain why you feel like this. Well, and this sounds like a freer practice, because as we said in the previous episode, freer practice focuses on communication, fluency. And it also characterized by unlimited production of language, which is what we have here, because the students would express their ideas regarding this, and there's no way we can know how much they will produce about each item. And also, the language would be unpredicted. We don't know what the students would say. There are no fixed correct answers here, which means that this is a freer practice, and that leaves us with no control practice. And this is why and this is what you need to plan at home. You need to find a good control practice. Now, it's a good idea to go to the workbook and see whether it gives you good control practice activities or not. Let's do that. Now, here we are. So we've got a very nice activity, and it seems that it's control practice. It says match beginnings of sentences to endings, which means language is predicted, of course. We have all language here, and there are fixed answers, very limited production, nearly no production, and obviously the focus is on accuracy here. So that's a good control practice, so we can take it, start with it first, and then students would answer the question, then they check in pairs, then we move to the plenary where I give them feedback on this. And then after that, I will take them to the freer practice, okay, at the very end of the lesson, where they're going to express their ideas using the expressions related to the things you like and things you hate, and then they talk together, and fine. Now, the last stage in the TTT framework is what we call feedback. And my friends, in feedback, as we said before in all the previous episodes, we've got two kinds of feedback: content and language. So if I want to give content feedback, for example, for the freer practice here, what would it be? Let me show you. One thing you can do is to ask your students question like, tell me about your partner. Does he like waiting in queues? And then maybe he says, no, he doesn't like it, he can't stand it. And they say, why? Did it happen to him before and he waited for a long time? And then you ask follow-up questions, make students feel that you're very interested in what they're saying. And then you go to the language feedback part. And in the language feedback part, you go to the board, and then first you write some of the positive things you heard, and I mean by this, some of the accurate things you heard, you write them on the board. Like you say, I heard someone say, and I can't stand, okay, talking on the phone for a long time. I can't stand going on long journeys, okay? So that's a very lovely usage here. So try to say something positive about students first. try to say something positive about students' language first. And then after that, you might say something like, I heard someone saying, I can't stood. Okay, is that correct? What's wrong? And then you elicit the answers from your students. So again, in language feedback, you don't need to start with inaccuracies first. Try to start with something that you liked about your students, sharing. And then when you come to the inaccuracies, make sure that you don't mention students' names. Just put the mistake on the board and then ask the students to try to correct it with you. And these are the stages of the TTT framework. So the first stage, leading, and then test, and then teach, and then test, and then feedback. And don't forget that in the teaching stage, you need to cover meaning, pronunciation, and form. And in the second test stage, don't forget to cover controlled practice and freer practice. Thank you so much, my friends. And in the coming episode, we'll be talking about the PPP framework. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.